Long before the American colonies murmured of independence, a different empire ruled their nights. The Blood Court of London, hidden beneath the Thames in catacomb chambers lined with obsidian and bone, had governed vampire kind since the fall of Rome. As the British Empire expanded, so too did its nocturnal reach. In the New World, 13 vampire lodges were established, one in each colony. These were not brutish dens of bloodlust, but elegant societies operating from within the highest echelons of colonial life. In Boston, the lodge met beneath Old North Church. In Charleston, within catacombs stolen from indigenous burial sites. Their influence flowed through governors' mansions, Masonic halls, and the coffee houses where newspapers were born. Each lodge had one rule above all: serve the crown, serve the court. The lodges were tasked with more than feeding and survival. They were enforcers of political obedience. Slaves were traded not only for sugar and cotton, but sometimes for the rarest currency, bloodlines with pure soul tones, ideal for turning. Colonial governors like William Tryon of New York and Thomas Hutchinson of Massachusetts occasionally dined with guests whose eyes glinted oddly in candlelight, and none suspected. But in the shadows, dissension stirred. Cassius Locke was born in 1721 in the port town of Marblehead, Massachusetts. Son of a fisherman and a salt worker, he apprenticed under a printer in Boston at the age of 13, learning typesetting, engraving, and oration. By 22, he had published pamphlets calling for the rights of colonial assemblies and spoke in taverns against taxation. He was brilliant and a threat. In 1743, he disappeared after a heated exchange with loyalist magistrates. A body was never found. In truth, Cassius had been turned, not by accident or malice, but as an experiment. Lord Alaric Greyborn, an envoy from the London Blood Court, believed Cassius could become a bridge, a colonial-born vampire loyal to court, capable of shaping local opinion. Cassius was seduced by the promise of knowledge, immortality, and power to protect his people. But the transformation did not go as planned. Most who are turned forget their lives. Their humanity fades like a childhood dream. But Cassius remembered every scream, every funeral sermon, every injustice. His soul clung to the cause of liberty, like bone to marrow. Alaric tried to break him. Starvation, isolation, the bloodthirst. But Cassius endured. And by 1750, he had vanished from the court sight, a fugitive. As the colonies entered the 1750s, tensions with France spilled into French and Indian War from 1754 to 1763. While George Washington fought skirmishes in the Ohio Valley and General Edward Braddock died near the Monongahela, vampire politics shifted in tandem. The Blood Court wanted British dominance. The lodges ensured American soldiers bled for it. They infiltrated supply lines, manipulated Indian tribes through cursed artifacts, and drained wounded officers under the guise of battlefield triage. Cassius, now working from the shadows, began his quiet rebellion. He sabotaged blood shipments sent to the lodges. He exposed vampire agents posing as Anglican priests. In 1758, at Fort Duquesne, he secretly aided French-allied Delaware warriors to escape a vampire purge party organized by the Virginia Lodge. He saved lives. He left no trace. His name became myth, whispered among enslaved field workers and frontier scouts. They called him the Pale Rider. Cassius could not fight alone forever. In 1762, he met Eleanor Vale, a half-blood born in London to a vampire noblewoman and a mortal poet. Raised in both worlds, Eleanor had been trained in vampiric tactics but harbored sympathy for human suffering. She had come to Boston as a court observer, but found herself disturbed by the sheer cruelty of colonial rule. Cassius offered her something the Blood Court never could: purpose. They made a pact: recruit carefully, turn only those who volunteered, feed only from the willing, fight not for dominion, but for freedom. By 1765, the Nocturne Pact had 12 members: a Hessian soldier, a Cherokee shaman, a Spanish merchant from New Orleans, a freed African woman from Virginia who practiced old blood rites. Each brought unique skills. Each had suffered. Each sought atonement. And they vowed never to drink from children. Their war began quietly. Silver coins poisoned at taverns frequented by loyalist vampires. British ships carrying livestock burned in southern harbors. Cryptic symbols scrawled on tavern walls. An eye inside a thorn circle told the oppressed, "You are not alone." As London grew bolder, the lodges acted. The Stamp Act of 1765, the Townshend Acts of 1767, and later the Tea Act of 1773 were not simply economic measures. They were part of a longer vampire strategy. Every tax fueled not only the British treasury, but the blood courts feeding routes and political rituals. Blood was traded in exchange for compliance. Cassius knew this. He warned the Sons of Liberty. He wrote pamphlets under dozens of pseudonyms: Lucian Ash, Red Mourner, Pale Mercury. Some even reached Franklin in London. Others were intercepted and destroyed. But none could stop the event of December 16th, 1773, the Boston Tea Party. While Samuel Adams rallied men to dump tea into the harbor, two members of the Nocturne Pact, Eleanor and the freedwoman Sibylla, intercepted a shipment of vampire casks mislabeled as Darjeeling. Inside, blood, hundreds of gallons, intended for the Massachusetts Lodge's Feast of Renewal, a ritual that would have bound 30 new colonists into vampiric servitude. Eleanor set ablaze. The harbor burned red. By 1774, the lodges were furious. The coercive acts passed. Boston was punished. The Massachusetts Lodge demanded retaliation, not just political, but personal. The Blood Court dispatched an old enforcer to silence the Nocturne Pact, Lucius Malvernus. Lucius was not subtle. He arrived in the guise of a diplomat, wearing a scarlet coat and a powdered wig, but those who looked into his eyes saw fire. He began turning loyalist militia officers without consent. He enthralled magistrates. He blackmailed Benjamin Church, a key rebel doctor, into revealing the names of sympathizers. The Nocturne Pact was nearly exposed. Cassius and Eleanor were forced underground. Their safe house in Salem was burned. Sibylla was captured and interrogated by the Virginia Lodge and executed by ritual starvation, her death blamed on disease. Cassius swore vengeance. Let their lodges burn before they bind another soul, he vowed. In 1775, Philadelphia became the center of revolution. As the First Continental Congress gathered, so too did the lodges. Underneath Carpenter's Hall, vampire envoys from across the colonies met in secret. Their goal, ensure the rebellion failed. But Cassius had other plans. The Nocturne Pact infiltrated their meeting. Using blood sight, Eleanor read their secret deliberations. She learned of the Blood Edict, an agreement with the British Crown, that if rebellion persisted, all colonial vampires would be ordered to destroy rebel strongholds, beginning with Boston and Philadelphia. She also saw a name, George Washington. The Virginia Lodge had plans to turn him, not kill but convert. Cassius reacted immediately. The pact warned Washington via coded letter. Washington, skeptical but pragmatic, responded with one line: "If evil walks in daylight, then I ride before dawn." On April 18, 1775, Paul Revere rode out with news that British troops were marching to seize arms from colonial militias. What history didn't record, another rider followed, cloaked in black, moving swifter and quieter. Eleanor Vale, carrying an ancient blade of sun-tempered silver, headed to the outskirts of Lexington. The British weren't alone. With them, 3 crimson arbiters of the Massachusetts Lodge, vampire assassins, moved to eliminate key rebel leaders under the cover of night. Cassius intercepted one. The battle was silent, save for the hiss of silver through sinew. By dawn, only one arbiter remained. He saw the militia form ranks. He saw the townspeople raise muskets with shaking hands. And he whispered, "They do not know what hunts them." Cassius emerged from a tree line behind him. "No," he said, "but they will know what protects them." Then he struck. April 19th, 1775. The shot heard round the world echoed across Lexington Green. History says it was a skirmish, that 8 Americans died, that the war began that day. What history forgets? The sun rose over more than corpses. It rose over ash. The remains of the last crimson arbiter, scattered beneath a pine tree marked with strange symbols. It rose over Cassius Lock, watching from the shadows, wounded but smiling faintly. And it rose over a new nation, not yet born, but stirring. Above the fields, a single raven circled and vanished into the wind. 1776 dawned blood red. The British Crown had declared the colonies in open rebellion. The war was no longer just musket lines and military dispatches. It had entered the realm of symbols, oaths, and ancient allegiances. In London, beneath the Thames, the Blood Court convened for the first time in a century. The Queen's war cabinet sat above, debating naval movements and Hessian contracts. Below them, unseen by history, the undead elders debated a deeper issue. Should America be purged? The vampire aristocracy had always worked behind the curtain. Kings and parliaments ruled by day. Vampires controlled coin, marriage, and memory by night. But America had grown unruly. The 13 lodges had fractured, and whispers of Cassius Lock's Nocturne Pact had reached even the oldest blood crypts in Rome. Revolution, spat Bloodlord Clemens of Saxony, is a contagion. Let us burn it with the sun. A vote was called. The verdict, unanimous. The Blood Court issued the Crimson Decree of 1776. All American lodges must crush the rebellion, both human and vampire. The Nocturne Pact was declared anathema, a blood crime punishable by eternal torment. The War of Independence had become a war of extinction. In Boston, now under siege, Cassius Lock stood within the crypt of King's Chapel, addressing the 10 surviving members of the Nocturne Pact. He was thinner now. His wounds from Devil's Den had never fully healed. Silver embedded near his ribs pulsed under his skin, forcing him to ration his blood. But his voice remained unbroken. They declared war on freedom, Cassius said, not just the freedom of men, but of souls. They will burn our kind before they ever let us change. Eleanor Vale, armored in shadow-dyed linen and a silver-threaded sash, stepped forward. Then let us burn brighter. One by one, the pack members pricked their thumbs and added blood to a silver bowl, forged from melted loyalist coinage. They recited the Midnight Oath, a binding vow that granted no protection from death, only memory. If they died, their names would be whispered in battlefields, etched in hidden stone. They would not live forever, but they would never be forgotten. In June 1776, the Second Continental Congress assembled in Philadelphia. The room was hot, the air heavy with sweat and treason. Thomas Jefferson sat hunched, scribbling furiously with a quill dipped in iron gall ink. His first draft was raw, almost too raw. But what history doesn't record? Jefferson was being watched. Eleanor Vale, veiled and disguised as a courier's wife, sat in the gallery above, studying him. She had orders to ensure that if any clause opened the door to lodges, it would be removed. The lodges, too, were watching. Members of the Virginia and Pennsylvania lodges, still operating in secret, sent infiltrators to Congress, posing as aides, servants, even delegates. On June 28th, after a late-night walk with Benjamin Franklin, Jefferson returned to find a sealed letter on his desk. The wax bore no crest, only a symbol, an eye within a circle of thorns. It read, "There is a second declaration, hidden but real, signed in blood. Guard it. When this nation forgets the price, remember us." Jefferson never spoke of the note, but the next day he added a curious sentence to his draft, that all men are created equal, endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights. Franklin asked why he'd chosen creator. Jefferson simply replied, because even monsters believe in something. Though the Battle of Lexington had occurred in 1775, its echoes haunted 1776. The Nocturne Pact had ensured that Malvernus's first vampire attack failed. But the Blood Court was learning. In early July, word arrived that Redcoat reinforcements were disembarking in New York, led by General William Howe and protected by Crimson Arbiters, vampires in crimson-trimmed cloaks, hand-picked for brutality and obedience. These arbiters would not fail like their predecessors. Their fangs were sharpened by ritual, their minds stripped of guilt, their orders find and destroy the Nocturne Pact by any means necessary. Cassius knew they were coming. He needed to strike first, and Lexington would be the stage once again. Only this time, it wouldn't be a town square. It would be the woods outside Concord, where a new lodge had been uncovered, hidden beneath a loyalist church. The vampires of the Concord Lodge had stored 10 blood casks imported from Port-au-Prince. These casks weren't just for sustenance. They were used in the binding, a ritual that can enthrall an entire company of mortal troops. Cassius dispatched the pact in teams. Eleanor and the Cherokee tracker, Iuka, scouted the grounds. The Prussian sabersmith Friedrich Krell forged anti-vampire weapons out of iron nails salvaged from scorched barns. The freedwoman Sibylla, now a spirit in shadows, whispered secrets through dream visits to friendly mortals. The mission began under moonlight. It ended in fire. July 4th, 1776. As Congress in Philadelphia ratified the Declaration of Independence, Cassius and Eleanor stood before the burning remains of the Concord Lodge. Inside, 7 vampires had perished. The blood casks had been destroyed. The binding ritual was halted, but the price was steep. Friedrich Krell was lost, pierced by a stake made from the bone of a colonial trader. His ashes were scattered in the river. Eleanor held Cassius back as he tried to go after the retreating Crimson Arbiters. "Let them run," she said. "They'll carry fear with them now." Cassius nodded. "We gave them fire. Now we give them belief." That night, in the woods, Eleanor carved into a tree. July 4th, 1776. We are free. Not safe, but free. With the British fleet threatening New York and General Washington preparing defenses on Long Island, the Nocturne Pact reached out, secretly, to his inner circle. A courier named Jeremiah Cross, a human ally of the Pact, delivered an encoded message to Alexander Hamilton. The young officer, already known for his fierce intellect and growing reputation, decoded it by lantern light. It simply read, "You do not stand alone in the dark, but you must pretend we don't exist." Hamilton, shaken but intrigued, replied with another message, "So long as you bleed with us. I care not what walks beside me." That letter was delivered by hand to Eleanor. She smiled. "He'll be president someday," she murmured, "if the world lasts that long." The alliance of shadow and flame was born. Washington's men and the Nocturne Pact would not officially communicate, but each would protect the other when needed. It would prove critical in the weeks ahead. In late August 1776, the Battle of Long Island saw British forces crush American resistance. Howe's army, supported by the Hessians in naval bombardment, pushed Washington to the brink of disaster. But what history doesn't record? Beneath the chaos of cannon and musket fire, the Crimson Arbiters launched a simultaneous assault on the Nocturne Pact's safe house in Manhattan. Their goal: kill Cassius Locke, crush the Pact, end the vampire rebellion. Cassius was waiting. The battle beneath the city, fought in the old Dutch tunnels and stone catacombs of New Amsterdam, lasted 6 hours. Flame wards were lit. Salt lines were drawn. The Arbiters came in waves. Eleanor fought one-on-one against Baron Rurik, a brutal vampire general with metal talons. She decapitated him with a silver sickle and used his own blood to blind the others. When the dust cleared, the pack had survived, but only barely. Cassius collapsed from blood loss. 3 members were missing, and the safe house was gone. They fled to Harlem Heights. The humans above fought their own battle. And when Washington staged his daring retreat across the East River under fog, Pact agents helped scatter and mislead British scouts. The revolution lived on. So did the Pact. Fall of 1776. The Hudson River ran red. As Washington's army retreated across New Jersey, morale dropped. The British pushed harder. Spies were everywhere. But the Nocturne Pact faced an even crueler betrayal. One of their own, Victor Altham, a colonial-born vampire, had been captured and turned back to court. Tortured, he revealed the location of the Pact's southern cell near Trenton. On December 21st, days before Washington's crossing of the Delaware, a massacre occurred. The Trenton cell, 5 vampires, 2 humans, were burned in their sleep. Ashes were scattered in sacred Delaware land. Their names were erased from the court's registry. Cassius stood by the river days later, silent. "They want to bury us," Eleanor said. "They always have," he replied. "But the soil's different here. It remembers." On the night of December 25th, 1776, Washington crossed the Delaware River to strike the Hessians at Trenton. What few know, a second crossing took place hours earlier. In a flat-bottomed boat, cloaked under illusion and mist, Eleanor, Iuka, and two others crossed the same river, aiming to intercept a vampire emissary believed to be meeting with the Hessian command. They found him, Gustav von Eberhard, former knight of the Black Forest Lodge, now serving the Blood Court. The duel was swift. Silver arrows struck true. Eberhard exploded into red mist. No one knew. No one would remember. But when Washington attacked Trenton the next morning, he faced no unnatural resistance. Only sleep-hungover Hessians, caught off guard. The victory turned the tide. Cassius, watching from a barn rooftop, whispered, "One day, they'll say it was luck." Eleanor nodded. "Let them. That's the price of hiding in the dark." Back in Philadelphia, the original declaration had been signed in July, but on January 1st, 1777, in a crypt below Independence Hall, 6 figures gathered. They included Cassius, Eleanor, Iuka, and 3 others whose names remain unrecorded. Each signed a shadow declaration, not on parchment, but on a sheet of silver, etched with blood. Its words echoed the human version, but ended differently. That to secure these liberties, some must walk without light, without thanks, and without the hope of heaven. Only the certainty that freedom is worth bleeding for. They sealed it in a case of bone and buried it deep in the earth. Cassius stared down and said, "We may not see the end, but we'll damn well make sure it starts." December 1777. The Continental Army limped into Valley Forge, just outside Philadelphia. Starving, barefoot, dying. General George Washington paced the frozen campgrounds, a map clutched in his gloved hand, his breath visible in the frost. His soldiers had no coats, no boots, no food. Over 2,000 would die that winter from disease and exposure. In secret, the Nocturne Pact watched from the tree-lean. Cassius Locke, still recovering from wounds sustained during the Manhattan Crypt siege, stood beside Eleanor Vale. Both wore thick cloaks dyed to match the snowfall. Their eyes scanned the camp, not with pity, but with purpose. "These men will not last," Eleanor whispered. "They must," Cassius said. "If they fall, the idea of liberty dies with them." Eleanor looked to the eastern hilltop, where a supply caravan meant for the rebels had been intercepted. Its soldiers drained, the wagons burned. The Blood Court had sabotaged it. "They're starving them," she said, "bleeding them to death without spilling a drop." Cassius turned to her. "Then we give them blood," he said, "but not as they expect." By January 1778, the camp teetered on collapse. Washington wrote letters to Congress in desperation, begging for supplies. Morale was gone. Men deserted daily. That night, something changed. A soldier named Private Levi Mercer was found alive in the woods. He'd been missing for 2 days. When he was discovered, he had no frostbite. Despite being barefoot, his eyes were clear. His wounds healed. All he said was, "The Pale Ones gave me fire." He was dismissed as mad. But he wasn't alone. Within days, rumors spread. Figures cloaked in white were leaving bundles at the edges of camp. Blankets that never tore. Cured meat that didn't spoil. Tinctures that stopped infection within hours. Washington heard the whispers. He called his generals to a midnight council. Among them was General Nathaniel Greene, Henry Knox, and the Prussian drill master Baron von Steuben, who had recently arrived to help reorganize the army. "The men speak of phantoms," Greene said. Von Steuben chuckled. "Then we train the phantoms too." But Washington remained silent. His eyes had caught something outside, a figure in the trees. When he stepped out, Eleanor Vale was waiting. Washington did not draw his sword. Instead, he offered her a seat on the stump near the fire. Eleanor removed her hood. Her skin was pale, her breath non-existent, but her presence was not threatening. It was noble, measured. "I know what you are," Washington said. "And I know what you're becoming." She replied. Washington frowned. "Explain." "More than a general," she said. "More than a rebel. You're an ideal. And ideals are hunted." Washington studied her. "You fed my men?" "No." We gave them choice. They chose to live. Washington nodded slowly. Then I owe you thanks. Eleanor stood. You owe us nothing. Just win. She began to turn away. Tell me, he called, why do you fight for men? She paused. Because monsters should not rule, not even the immortal ones. And then she vanished into the snow. By late February, the soldiers had a name for their hidden saviors, the Pale Angels. They were whispered about in the tents. Some swore they saw them standing on night watch, motionless on the hilltops. Others claimed one healed their dying brother with a touch. Most never saw anything but felt the change. They were not angels. They were the Nocturne Pact. Iuka the Tracker led hunting parties deep into the forests, killing rogue vampire thralls that had been turned by the Blood Court and unleashed to spread despair. Sibylla, once mortal, now spectral, spoke in dreams of dying soldiers, giving them one last surge of courage before they passed. Cassius, though weakened, worked tirelessly in secret for months, smuggling in weapons, intercepting loyalist spies, and burning court messages. But the most powerful moment came on March 5th, 1778, during a sermon by Washington's chaplain. As he read aloud Psalm 23, the soldiers saw 3 figures in white cloaks walking the edge of the camp, silent, watching, blessing. No one moved. The chaplain paused, then continued, Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, the crowd of men finished together. I will fear no evil. Spring arrived. So did change. Baron von Steuben began drilling the troops into an efficient fighting force. With his methods, precise, harsh, relentless, discipline returned. Morale lifted. What history doesn't record. Von Steuben's techniques were enhanced by secret observations from a Nocturne Pact. Eleanor, once trained by the elite vampire houses of Europe, shared combat principles that had been lost for centuries. She advised Steuben in the shadows on formation tightness, field reading, and how to demoralize through motion. He never spoke her name, but in a letter to a Prussian friend, von Steuben once wrote, There's a ghost here who fights better than I ever did. I fear she trains us not for war, but for legend. Meanwhile, Cassius led a surgical strike on a blood cargo depot hidden near Lancaster, Pennsylvania. British vampires had been harvesting American captives, draining them to empower blood rituals before sending energy to London through cursed relics. The pact destroyed the facility and freed the prisoners. The tide was beginning to turn. March 1778. Lucius Malvernus, disgraced bloodlord of the British court, arrived in secret to rally the Crimson Arbiters. He planned to unleash Project Duskfall, a coordinated bloodstorm spell that would blot out the sun over Valley Ford for a full month, giving vampires free rein to massacre the army. He underestimated the pact. Cassius, guided by Sibylla's visions, confronted him at the edge of the Brandywine. Eleanor struck the first blow. Iuka snared his talons with blessed sinew. Cassius pierced his chest with a stake carved from the Liberty Tree. Malvernus laughed, even as he burned. You think you've won, Locke? You've only bought them time. Cassius, eyes like ash, leaned close. Time is all they need. Malvernus turned to dust. The arbiters scattered. Duskfall never happened. On April 10th, Cassius summoned the pack to a hidden chamber beneath a Quaker meeting house in Pennsylvania. There were now 13 members, one for each colony. Each had suffered. Each had fought. Each bore scars, some ancient, some fresh. They sat in a circle, surrounding a replica of the Declaration, etched in silver, updated with a new clause, that those who walk in darkness may do so not to rule, but to protect the light. Cassius stood. We are not Americans. We are not even human anymore. But we bleed when they bleed. We burn when they suffer. And we rise when they hope. He paused, eyes fixed on each member. When history forgets us, let us remember each other. They lit a candle, one for each colony. When they left, the room was sealed with blood magic. Only those with pure intent would ever enter again. By June, the camp had transformed. Washington's troops, once ragged and desperate, were trained, fed, and hardened. Von Steuben's reforms gave them discipline. The Pale Angels gave them faith. And the victories began to mount. At Monmouth, they held their own. At Rhode Island, they stood with pride. Slowly, America proved it could fight not just with musket, but with resolve. The blood court began to withdraw. London grew quiet. And for the first time in years, the Nocturne Pact found moments of peace. On a summer evening in 1778, as the army moved toward White Plains, Washington summoned Cassius to his tent. No guards, no audience, just the two of them. Washington offered wine. Cassius declined. "I don't drink," he smiled faintly. "Not that." Washington nodded. "You kept us alive." "No, you did," Cassius replied. "We just helped hold the night." Washington leaned forward. "When this war ends, what happens to you?" Cassius hesitated. "We vanish." Washington frowned. "You fought. You bled. You believed. You deserve peace." Cassius looked away. "We're not made for peace." He stood, cloak rustling. "But we'll defend it." Washington reached out, gripped his arm. "Then you're one of us." Cassius turned back. "No, General. You're one of us." July 4th, 1778. On a quiet hillside outside Valley Forge, 13 graves sat in a circle, unmarked, save for a single symbol carved in stone, a circle of thorns. No one remembered their names. No records remained. But that night, under the starlight, a child wandering with her father spotted something strange. A pale woman standing beside the graves, laying a silver rose atop each one. The child blinked, and she was gone. Years later, that child would write about it. And when the Smithsonian Museum excavated the site in 1942, they found only one item beneath the soil, a small flag, hand-stitched, 13 stars, and along the border, almost invisible, ad lucem per umbra, to light through shadow.